Hello. Today I'm going to look at how to get free plants from division. I'm going to start by looking at bulbs and corms. So the first question is, what are bulbs and corms? Bulbs and corms, along with rhizomes and tubers, are the underground storage organs of many plants. So, when we think of bulbs, we probably think of things like onions, or daffodils, or tulips. And for corms, which are similar, but different, we think of things like crocuses or gladioli. So, how can we reproduce these plants by division? For demonstration purposes, I've taken a bulb of garlic. Now, as we know, the garlic bulb is made up of lots of little cloves, and here's one I've removed from this bulb. Now, in fact, each of these little cloves is like a little individual bulb in itself. It has a kind of rounded or pointy end here and a flatter end where it was attached to the bottom of the bulb here. And all we do simply is remove these and plant them in soil. Now normally with garlic we do this in autumn, like with most bulbs. So here I have a pot of soil. Soil is here, and I would actually push the garlic into the soil about here, about double its own depth. So take the length of the bulb and push it in about double under the soil, with the pointy end pointing upwards, because the flatter bottom end is where the roots are going to come out, which is at the bottom, and the pointy end is where we're going to get shoots. So that's it for garlic. What about the others, the tulips and the daffodils and so on? Tulips and daffodils will flower in spring or early summer, and then the flowers will start to die back. So it's a good moment to deadhead them, remove the dead flowers. And also the rest of the greenery will die back too. It'll start turning yellow and start to wilt. Now from this point, if you count 2 months, you can then go searching for the bulb underground. Now some people do this every year. They store their bulbs. But here what I'm interested in is finding the main bulb, and around the main bulb may well be some baby bulbs starting to grow. Now, as I did with the garlic, you can remove these and replant them. Now, you can either replant them immediately, which is what I would suggest, or you could maybe save them with the main bulbs, which is really not the best idea. The better idea is to simply replant them and replant your main bulb too. And again, here we will have new plants for free. One thing to note, certain plants, for example the Egyptian walking onion, or the rocambole onion as it's also known, will produce small bulbs at the end of its stem rather than underground, so they're even easier to harvest and then replant elsewhere. And there are other plants, particularly things like succulents and cacti and things like that, which will produce little what I call leaves, which fall off the mother plant onto the ground and actually start growing as new plants too. Here I have one of my favourite indoor plants, which has many names. I'll put the Latin name on the screen, but a lot of its other nicknames I like a lot, which are St. George's sword, snake plant, or my favourite, mother-in-law's tongue. Now I bought this plant as a little plant like this a few years back, and it has multiplied and grown to produce a number of very, very vigorous plants like this. I actually went round the house and counted how many it's produced, and I think there's about 40, all of about this kind of proportion. Now in this pot, this plant has actually produced, I would say, daughter plants which are actually still in the pot. So what we can do is we can actually simply get in here and cut this plant at the base where it's sort of the root system is, and then repot it, which is in effect how I've multiplied this original little plant that I had. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of these here side plants, one of the smaller ones, and as I said, dig down in the soil, find where it meets the parent plant and simply cut it and remove it. One of the things about this plant is, strangely, it won't really have much root on it. But hey, we can still plant it without much root, and it will produce new roots in its new pot. I have so many of these, I think I'm actually going to start giving them to neighbours as presents. So let's get to work. Here I have a nice little, I would say, child plant of the main plant. So what I've got to do is just push down a bit. In fact, there's an awful lot of greenery in this pot. I should have done this a lot earlier, but there I can feel under my finger the main root. So I'm going to go in with some secateurs and actually try to cut this joining point at the root level. Here we have our little, I call baby plant from the main plant. It's actually a clone, a copy of the main plant. And here we have a little bit of main root with actually surprisingly good amount of little roots too. So all I need to do is make a nice big hole in my pot to allow it to go in. Basically plant it so that it's coming out of the soil at the same level that it was coming out of the original soil in the main pot. And there we are, it's well patted in. Make sure that the soil around it is firm, and now all I need to do is water it and give it as a present to one of my neighbours. You can do something similar with rhubarb. In the springtime, when your rhubarb rhizomes start showing little, usually red buds above the surface of the soil, you can dig down a little bit and chop out big lumps of rhizome. I would say, I don't know, about 4 inches, 10 centimetres worth of rhizome with a bud on it, and actually displace it and plant it elsewhere in the garden. This way you can multiply your rhubarb around the garden and also allow the original rhubarb to have a little more space to grow even more. There's one other thing I'd like to mention when talking about division, and it's basically dividing clumps. Now, certain plants will have a number of individuals all growing together closely. And as we've seen with my indoor plant, sometimes we need a little bit more space to allow the plants really to thrive. So what we can do is we can dig up a clump and gently divide it into a number of smaller clumps and then replant those elsewhere in the garden. Now initially this doesn't in fact multiply the number of plants, but it gives each clump a bit more space to grow in, and it will then start producing more individuals. So in effect we are going to produce more plants around the garden. And often dividing up the clumps too tends to rejuvenate a little the plants that are in these clumps and gives them a little bit of fresh air so that they can thrive. So that's it. We've covered a number of ways of dividing plants to get more plants for free.